You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by addclasses.com. Visit addclasses.com for helpful online programs and resources today. Hello, and welcome back to ADHD Support Talk. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris, and I am a productivity and ADHD coach who empowers professionals to take control of their time and their lives so that they can fulfill their potential and have more time and energy for what matters most to them. I am a woman with ADHD myself, guys, so I have been where so many of my clients are, and I get it. I've come out the other side, so to speak. So I've gone from living in constant chaos and overwhelm and underperformance, like so many of us with ADHD do, to a life of more success and fulfillment than I once dreamed was possible. And I believe every single one of us can share our own version of success ourselves. You'll learn more about me and what I do and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. Today, I have back with me Tara McGillicuddy, the founder and host of ADHD Support Talk. And in a moment, we're going to talk about what we're calling the My Fault default for adults with ADHD. So welcome back, Tara.
Hi, I'm glad to be back. My name is Tara McGillicuddy, and like Lynne said, I help people with ADHD and other challenges lead happier, more productive lives. I help them shift their energy to lead happier and more productive lives. You can learn more about me at taramcgillicuddy.com.
Awesome. So it's funny. I always think, and I, some of it is what I notice, right? But like sometimes our podcast topics come up because they are like recurring themes that we see in our lives and with our clients. So today, when Tara and I were getting on to do this recording, we do these recordings on Zoom. We've had a recurring appointment in the calendar for ever and a half, same link, whatever. There was a disconnect with the link. Long story short, I got the email thingy that Tara was on Zoom. I came on and she wasn't there. So my immediate thing to go to was, I must be on the wrong link. Quick, end the meeting, go back to the emails and get on the right link. But Tara still wasn't there. So then I'm thinking, now I really screwed up, right? It was just a matter of her coming off and coming back on again, but she was doing the same thing on her end. I wasn't there. She assumed she'd screwed up. She left and we were kind of coming in and out like as the other one was leaving. So we're laughing about it as we came back on, but I said, this is something that I see a lot of in my clients. And we were talking about it on one of my group calls today. It's my fault default response that so many of us with ADHD go right to. I know you can relate to this, Tara. I can relate to this. I mean, I hear about it all the time.
Yes. And I think part of it is, it makes sense. It's logical because in the past, we may have messed up. We may have forgotten something. We may have forgotten to lock the door. We may have lost our keys. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to go to that. I think it's how long we stay in it, if it leads to shame, how it's impacting our life. Like you and I, it seemed like forever, but it was a couple minutes that we were missing each other.
Right.
We got on, we laughed about it, we joked about it, and we have a great topic because of it. Whereas other people might be stuck in that, I messed up again, what's wrong with me, I'm awful, and they're not able to move forward as quickly, or they get stuck in that. So I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, how long do we stay in it? Can we shift out of it? And does it help us or hurt us?
Absolutely. It's a matter of degrees, right? It's a matter of how far down you go. When you've got decades of sort of historical proof, whatever, data that tells you that you're more likely to do these things than other people may be, like whether it's to screw up your calendar or, use a wrong link or whatever, those details that are so hard for some of us to manage, it's understandable why you go there. But how deeply you go into that and whether it turns into shame is really like what it's all about. One of the things I always hate, and this happens periodically, especially hate it with a new client because I know almost always where it's going to go, is if a private client calls for a coaching session and I've run a little long with the last session, or I've had to make a mad dash to the restroom or grab a drink or something in between calls and I don't answer. I know with almost all new clients, in that minute 30 seconds, 90 seconds between the time that I call them back and the time that they tried to call me. Most of them are going into, I screwed up again. It's my fault. She's never going to be able to help me. I'm disrespecting her time, whatever it is. And if I don't already have a text from them asking if they screwed up or apologizing for screwed up before I call them back, it's surprising.
Yeah.
It's not always us. It's good to take responsibility and to know where your shortcomings are. It's good to take responsibility when you do screw up, but their learning experiences, when it turns into shame and self-flagellation and all of that stuff, is where we get ourselves in big trouble.
So I think one thing is to ask the question, okay, what else could it be? All right, it might be that, it's my fault. I messed up. Whatever, ADD got in the way, ADD moment. But like, take a deep breath, detach emotionally, and ask the question, what else could be going on? Like today, we both did the same thing. And, we were able to detach and, get there. And, because I'm like, oh, Lynne's probably doing the same thing as me right now. Kind of like, when you get, like you said, the thing about your client, but have you ever like been on a call that gets disconnected? And you're both trying to call back at the same time and you get voicemail. So it's that type of thing. What else could it be? Maybe the internet's down. Maybe I think that's the thing. And then also, right, what is the end result I want? I want to get on the call on time with Lynne or whatever it is. And, once you get into that, you can be okay. But yeah, it's hard because especially new clients or people that are new to ADHD or people who've had, challenging life issues. And we go back to that default, my fault thing. It can be hard. And
it's hard
knowing that you can get out of it and there's ways to get out of it or not have it affect you as negatively as it before can be very helpful.
Absolutely. And a lot of it is about mindset, right? So it's noticing that that's where you're going, noticing that that's what's happening. And, if it's an emotional thing and it's got a lot of energy around it in terms of like the blame and the shame in that moment, it's not always easy to step back and detach, but coming back to it, like, what could I have done to make sure this goes differently next time? What can I do moving forward to have a little more confidence in what's in my calendar? What can I do going forward to have a little more certainty that, the screw up is not going to be mine? And if it is, like, to minimize that impact, but also like to be able to shift yourself into that more, I always call it the engineering perspective, like step back and look at it from an analytical perspective rather than a moral judgment, character flaw, I'm a failure kind of blame and shame mindset. There are always solutions, but if we are tangled up in blame and shame and self-flagellation and all that stuff, we're not going to see the solution.
Yeah. And one thing to bring up is sometimes people can go in the opposite direction.
Absolutely.
Where they just blame everyone else and they don't take any responsibility. So it's finding, the middle ground. And, you must get it sometimes. We both do customer service for people with ADHD, and a lot of people are newer to the label diagnosis that they have ADHD. And something might go wrong and we'll get like nasty emails and then of course I'll, reach out and say, this is really what happened. And some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was something that I did but some people just will never take responsibility. So it's that finding the middle ground, the balance, harmony, whatever you call it,
the sweet spot,
to make sure you're not going from one extreme to the other, because my fault default can just be as negative as the, it's somebody else's fault. I'm not going to take any responsibility. And it might depend on, what's going on in your life, what the actual situation is, but finding that balance and, how does it impact your life?
Absolutely. I call that sort of the other side. We call that equipment failure in my house. And some of that is self-awareness. I think for some of us, especially with ADHD, it is that, we hear so much about RSD and rejection sensitivity and that all of that, that is a coping mechanism. It's a defense mechanism, and that can become a habit. Right. So we call it equipment failure because when my son was a young teen, my son with ADHD, he went through a phase where that taking responsibility he just wasn't in a place where that was going to happen. So every time something didn't go well, it was because, we didn't buy him the expensive bat that he wanted, or,
Yep.
He didn't have something that he needed, or something else failed, not him. He was just not in a place, maturity wise, emotionally, but really more than anything in a self-awareness place where he could really look at that a little bit more objectively. So I always call that like it's equipment failure. It's defensiveness, right? And that's a habit. It's a coping mechanism.
Yes.
It's a survival strategy that some of us develop, over many, many years of struggle. It's sort of a self-protection thing, but that's not going to serve you any more than the whole my fault default perspective is. So it really is finding that sort of middle balanced way of looking at it.
Yes.
Good points. So really it's about awareness. It's about making sure that you intentionally step back and look at it when you can. Right? Stepping back, detaching a little bit, looking at it from that engineering perspective, with that a little more analytical problem solving. If you can, if it helps to think about it, like how would someone else look at this? So if you know someone who's good at being detached and analytical, ask yourself, how would so-and-so see, or, kind of stepping into that. If I were the other person, what would this maybe look like? To them. And
detachment is, I don't know if skill is the right word, but it's something that takes practice. And a lot of us with ADHD, we're very emotional, sensitive people. Some of us are empaths, some of us are highly sensitive. That detachment doesn't always come natural to us. So it takes practice, and it becomes a skill. It's like a muscle.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to strengthen it. And, listening to Lynne and I right now, you might most likely are not going to be able to practice that detachment right away and get it right away. So it's something, it's a skill. And I don't always use it. I've gotten a lot better where I don't take everything as personally as I used to. But that's one thing, in whether it's working with a coach, mental health professional, reading a book, or I don't know, joining a detachment practice group. I don't think they have that, but something on that
Who knows?
Practice that skill.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing. You don't want to become too detached when you're just a robot. So, but
absolutely.
But it's another, that finding that balance, as you say, your spot.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is a habit. It's a shift in how we think. It's a skill we have to develop. It's a habit in the way we think and the way we react to things. And when you kind of, that intersection between our sensitivity and our sort of mindset stuff and any kind of impulsivity, whether it's verbal impulsivity, whether it's behavioral impulsivity, or whether it's just cognitive like impulsivity, can really make these kinds of things, when something goes wrong, depending on where you fall on that sort of continuum of the my fault default or equipment failure, where in the middle, you've got to be careful, right? That's where people get themselves in trouble, hitting send on an email when they're upset about something, or picking up the phone when they shouldn't pick up the phone, and not giving themselves space. So recognizing when something feels emotional, or when you have a lot of energy around something, and knowing that alone is a good reason to pause. That's a good reason to step back.
And we're all human. We all have ADD, ADHD, and we're going to have bad days every now and then. So we might go back to that bad, crazy behavior every once in a while, and don't beat yourself up for that. Just be like, okay,
learn from it, take responsibility, and move forward.
Right. And taking responsibility is great. So I know the my fault default might go way to the extreme, but it's a good thing to take responsibility for your actions. So I want to make sure, like, we're not telling people don't take responsibility.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure we know taking responsibility, it's great. It's it's a good thing. Just don't blame yourself and get into that.
Absolutely. It's it is balance. And I always hate that word balance, because it implies some perfect equilibrium that we're always trying to find. But it really is the difference between taking responsibility and taking ownership of something in terms of your character and who you are. So taking responsibility versus, abdicating responsibility altogether, or taking responsibility as opposed to owning it as part of who you are deep down, and that those character judgments and those
Yes.
sort of moral judgments and moral failings that we assign to that we do. All of this stuff it's all stuff it's behavior that you can learn to change, things that you can learn to manage. It's not about who you are and the kind of person you are on the inside. And that's, I think, where we get things so tangled up sometimes. Like that's where the blame and shame spiral becomes so destructive, because we take ownership of that as part of who we are. And that's not who we are. No. Who I am is not someone who would intentionally leave Tara hanging on the wrong Zoom link. And who I am is not somebody who I'm using my double, triple negatives, but who I am is not somebody who doesn't care to have the right link in my calendar, right? That's not who I am. But who I am is also not a total screw up. Who I am is somebody who screws up sometimes, takes responsibility for it and sees how we can make sure that it's better moving forward. And that I think is the best that really any of us can do. We all screw up, right?
Oh, we do. Yes.
Always. I mean, we're human. That's by definition.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's what you do with it that matters.
Yes. And sometimes, like, look at this. We have a great episode to talk about, a great topic.
We think so.
A lot of times these mistakes, because that's when I make mistakes, when I have something going on in my life that I'm not happy about, once I get past it and start taking a deep breath, I'm like, okay, what can I learn from this? Can I do a blog post about it if it's ADHD related? How do I make, lemonade out of lemons or whatever you want to say? So that's one of the things to really look at is sometimes when you make that mistake, when you mess up, it can lead to something great.
If you choose to look at it as an opportunity for growth.
Yes.
And that's also a big mindset shift. That's not very easy if you're totally tangled up in the blame and the shame and the guilt and you need to do a lot of work there.
No, it takes, and getting out of that shame, that guilt is a process.
Absolutely.
And you and I we were both there.
Oh, I spent decades there.
That was my natural default, is that shame, blame, guilt, and all the other negative emotions. And I think we've both moved forward over the years. We still have times, we still have bad days.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Shit happens and that stuff comes back up.
I think that's the thing is, if you're listening to this and you're so full of shame, guilt, and all those negative emotions and the negative energy, you can begin to move out of it.
Absolutely.
Most likely it's not going to happen overnight.
Nope.
But it's a process, and we want it to happen right away, and it doesn't always happen that way, but there is hope.
It almost never happens right away. So you've got to be patient with yourself. You've got to acknowledge the things that are getting better. Give yourself points for effort, right? Points for effort in addition to credit for progress. So trying counts. Right. And a lot of times when we try and we don't end up exactly where we'd hope to, kind of way on the other side of this thing, we don't give ourselves any credit for trying, but trying counts.
It does.
I always tell my clients points for effort and credit for progress, all of it.
Because that trying, that effort, that's an intention to change, to shift.
Absolutely.
So, and it's, working with a coach, being part of a group, getting out of your head and speaking with somebody else can really help you shift and grow and get out of that negativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad we screwed up the Zoom links.
Yeah, me too.
Whatever happened, I'm glad the Zoom links got screwed up. It
was all your fault, Lynne.
It was, but again, shit happens. So after this call, I will take a few minutes and I will make sure that the Zoom links are correct. I will make sure that the calendar invitations are correct, and odds are good that it won't happen again. And if it does, we'll figure out what happened and we'll move forward from there.
Yeah. And for me, I'll wait longer. I'll send you a text if I'm waiting, instead of just assuming, I have the wrong link too. Yeah.
Right. We'll find each other. It's like when I was a kid, my mom used to always say, okay, if you get separated, find someone who works here and stay there. Like, don't go looking for me. Right?
Yes.
Don't walk around in circles. We'd have been in and out of Zoom links the whole rest of the day. But anyway, good stuff to think about. I love when these things happen. And, hopefully, Tara, you and I talking about this with our audience, the people who are listening, it being something that happens so very often and going to give people something a little bit different to think about, and a different way to start to approach this and start to change some of this for themselves. Well, any last thoughts, and tell our listeners again how they can learn more about you and find out what you're up to?
Well, I think the thing is just, know that this is something you can shift out of, and just look at how how is it impacting your life? Look at it. If you're identifying this my fault, default, fault, look at how it's impacting your life. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, learn more about my resources, you can find me at taramcgillicuddy.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Hopefully we gave you guys something to think about this time. As always, we appreciate your attention. We'll catch you next time on ADHD Support Talk. Thank you.
Thank you.